The developers of MultiVersus are releasing characters too quickly, and they're not coming out necessarily finished, and I think because of that, we're going to end up having a lot of reworked characters later on. Morty has finally arrived. There's 4 characters that are going to be coming out in Season 1 of MultiVersus. This is a good thing, or is it? The biggest concern when it comes to characters being released into the game is that sometimes the characters might be too similar, but in this case, we're running into the problem that these characters are too complex. We're shown bruisers, casters, supports, and tanks. As of right now, there are 4 classes that have been introduced to us, but Morty doesn't really fit into any one of those classes specifically. You can put Morty as a bruiser caster, but when you're looking at him in the game, it is not stated that he is both. While I appreciate that the developers of MultiVersus are thinking very broadly of their characters and not trying to define them or segment them, I think the issue now is that Morty doesn't necessarily have a specific identity or a specific way of playing him. Might end up feeling not necessarily finished. A lot of Morty's moves require him to have to run up, play very bruiser-like, and at the same time, there's a lot of caster abilities where you have to constantly be paying attention to your actives or your mines, your bombs, right? While I understand that there are similarities between Batman, LeBron, and Morty, platformers, when you think about a ranged character, you're generally going to be thinking of these as casters. You can think of Super Smash Bros. Having the Link characters. Those would generally be defined as casters rather than bruisers. You're generally going to have worse frames when it comes to fighting it close up, better scenarios when you're fighting from a distance. In this case, I think Morty doesn't really fit a mold in either one. He doesn't really work well effectively, both ranged or up close, and because of that, he kind of just feels very lackluster. I think Morty's just lacking identity, and I think the developers are trying to rush these characters too quickly that they might run into problems where we're gonna have to have a lot of reworked characters. Now, looking forward, we do have Rick Sanchez, and we have Black Adam and Stripe. Stop right there. Leave a comment right now. Do you think Rick Sanchez, Black Adam, or Stripe are going to be unbalanced? Do you think that they're going to be really good, really bad? What do you think? Leave a comment down below. And if you're enjoying this video so far, subscribe and drop a like. Okay, back to the video. My biggest concern now isn't necessarily that the characters aren't going to be exciting or fun or unique. It's more of the fact that they might be so unique that they don't necessarily follow one of these classes that have been defined by MultiVersus. Of course, can you change that? Can you create them and call them a hybrid? Yes, you can. The current issue is that they're not necessarily being defined. We also have problems such as Velma having too much utility, or some characters being so overloaded in their kits and other characters having so little in their kits that we are calling them honest. Naturally, there hasn't really been massive changes to a lot of these characters. I think the one that's probably being looked at the most is probably Batman, but that's because Batman is so popular and gets played so much that that's the reason that we're really paying a lot of attention to him. Things and changes, for example, that they're constantly doing for Batman is such as applying weaknesses at certain different points or certain moves being able to apply weaknesses, Batarang having different CDs that can affect how he is played and how you're going to be approaching the game as playing Batman. On the other hand, Velma is clearly the most overloaded kit in the entire game, and because of that was incredibly busted at a certain point. And while she's nerfed, she still feels incredibly oppressive in so many cases because of how many abilities she has. If you're able to incorporate the right perks and have the right teammates, you're honestly going to be able to have so much advantage with Velma, even with the way that they nerf. If you've ever played League of Legends, for example, and you know of the character named Thresh has been incredibly upsetting to nerf from the moment he was released. The reason for that is that League of Legends characters have 4 abilities. Thresh was so utility heavy and so good at what he needed to do that he had to get nerfed so many times because no matter how they nerfed, his utility was simply so much value that it didn't matter how much they nerfed him. And I think MultiVersus is now running into that problem and into that issue that no matter how much you're going to nerf Velma, if you don't remove some utility from her kit, she's just naturally going to be incredibly oppressive forever. We're also brought to that situation that some characters don't have enough in their kit or don't have enough value in their kit compared to others. Okay, well, the more complicated the character makes it more engaging and there's a higher skill ceiling for this character. But that's not always the case. I don't think Velma has a high skill ceiling. I think she's a little complicated, but I think after a few games, you kind of get the hang of it and you're able to utilize most of her utility. Morty, does have a lot of complexities. I think he's very, very complicated to play, but I don't think no matter how much you play him, he's still going to feel like a very hybrid caster, bruiser character to play. And I think not having a defined aspect of how the character is supposed to be played makes it not as good as it could be. Overall, I think multiverse characters have to be defined in what their intention or play style is supposed to be. I can understand some characters or some players want to play characters in certain or other ways, but you can always have the argument that if you want to play the character that way, you might as well just play someone else. That is honestly my opinion of it, and why you should honestly just play whatever fits your play style rather than what the character that you like most. And if you like that character so much, play the play style. You're forced into it. That's how the character was developed, and that's how the meta defines it as.